Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is the most evil you have witnessed? Serious. Not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. An older woman, grandmother, walking into a big box store pushing a carriage with what looked like a 6 to 9 month old baby girl riding in it, quietly. The woman bent over and bit the child's arm, and the child lost her breath first, then started crying and screaming hysterically. This happened 5 years ago, and it still haunts me. I asked her why the F she did that. She shook her head and said she didn't speak English. Not seen directly in high school, helped handicapped kids learn to swim. Favorite kid was persistent, loved the water, really happy and engaging, but at 12 was all of 3 feet tall, struggled mightily out of the water, had an odd skull, was severely mentally and physically challenged. I asked if he'd ever get better or grow, and mentor said no. He didn't have a condition per se, had been a normal kid until his dad threw him down the stairs as a baby. I had one of my kindergarten students try to commit suicide in my classroom one day. What? She ran out on this little balcony every room has, I don't know why, seems dumb, and I followed her. She looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "I want to die," before slamming her palms on the edge of the balcony in an attempt to hoist herself up and over. Luckily, I was able to grab her before she got over. I talked to her mom about it, and she didn't give an F. She very nonchalantly admitted to abusing the child and didn't care about the girl at all. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do about it, not in the US, as child services didn't really exist. Hopefully, this girl found an advocate or someone who cared.
Stayed at my friend's vacation house with him and his mom. The way his mom treated him was fine, but she was incredibly cruel to his 12-year-old sister. Called her fat, ugly, dumb, a whore, constantly berated her over everything, made jokes at her to make her feel bad. I remember we were eating spaghetti, and she saw and took her plate away, and told her straight to her face, "You're too fat to be eating this, and you can't be fat because you're ugly, and nobody wants a fat, ugly girl." And then she just threw the spaghetti onto her and told her to clean it up. It was the most demeaning, dehumanizing thing I'd ever seen. Later on, the girl was pretty horribly injured and disfigured in an accident, and they moved away after. No clue what happened with that family. I always think about how horrific the girl's upbringing was, and the sheer injustice of it all. Saw a car crashed into a tree. When I went by, I saw a person inside the car, stopped to help. The man got outside of the car in a rush and didn't want the police involved. After talking to him for a few minutes, I saw something move under a blanket on the passenger seat. The dude had his friend with him. The friend got knocked unconscious, and the dude hid him under the blanket so I wouldn't notice him. The guy needed an ambulance and I called one. He only did this because he didn't want to lose his driver's license. A dude broke into a house in our neighborhood, tied and beat up the person living there, an 80-year-old lady living alone, and stole all her valuable stuff. She managed to crawl out the window when the robber was distracted, limped over to her neighbor, and rang him out of bed at 3 a.m. He didn't hesitate, got the old lady in, locked all the doors just in case the robber would try to harm her further, and immediately called the police and an ambulance. I live in a very rural area, the kind of area where you don't have to lock your car or worry about robbers. So this happening so close by, that hit me. The old lady is doing fine again, but the robber was never found. It's a toss-up between my mom throwing a glass at my brother's head when he was 11 and I was 9, or when I went to counseling from my pastor after being sexually abused by boys in the church, and his solution was for me, a 10-year-old, to apologize to their families for tempting them. I've never seen people look at me, the 10-year-old temptress, so evilly, especially one of the guy's moms. She really didn't like me after that.
Sometimes these stories really get to me. This is one of them.
Pediatric nurse here, little 1.5-year-old sweet baby that sustained a fatal brain injury from the mom's boyfriend. I can't remember if the little one was thrown or beaten, but was declared brain dead. The family were at the bedside, complete with the mom sobbing and screaming hysterically. Then they all left, including the mother. It was the middle of the night, and we withdrew life support. It was myself, another nurse, a physician, and a respiratory therapist in the room, completely silent, as we watched the heart rate on the monitor decrease and then flatline. I felt so utterly alone. Now, many parents say their goodbyes before the breathing tube is removed, and of course they get to choose when to stay or leave. But this mother left to go visit her boyfriend in jail, the one who killed her only child.
I carried the baby to the morgue so that the child would have one last hug from someone that cared. My sister-in-law at age 27, yelling, taunting her grandma, then holding her by the shoulders and shaking her while physically blocking her from getting up from her chair over grandma eating the blueberries from blueberry cake. Her grandma is frail and cancer-ridden. A friend of mine saw a man collapsing on the street. As a medical professional, she knew what to do and started CPR when she realized he was basically dead. Others called an ambulance and it arrived 15 minutes later. She continued CPR until then. The man needed surgery but survived and is alive today. This happened about 5 years ago. However, one of his ribs broke while she did CPR. He sued her and wanted a bunch of money from the woman who saved her life. Thankfully, he didn't win, but that didn't erase what he did. Horrible. My significant other getting stabbed 7 times by a random stranger in the middle of a restaurant. It was horrific. After a week in the hospital with a collapsed lung and chest pump, a couple surgeries to get rid of old blood in his lungs, a wrist break, and obvious lasting medical trauma, he's made a full recovery. It was traumatic, to say the least. Maybe not exactly witnessed, but heard about. In college, I used to hang out at my mom's, at the time boyfriend's law office. He had a spare room that I could go into and do homework in between classes. I worked out well because the office was literally just a block away from campus. Occasionally, he'd need an impartial witness to view last will signings. These were often done in the office and generally a painless affair. Sometimes, though, we had to load up and go to the old folks' home or private residence to sign a new will. The one I remember most was a little old lady who was probably the smallest adult I'd ever seen. She was completely bedridden and could really only turn her head to look at you. She spoke in the quietest, softest voice you've ever heard, but was fully aware of what was going on. She explained to us that her eldest daughter, who at the time was the power of attorney for all medical and financial decisions, had taken almost everything from her. All of her savings were gone, anything and everything of value, including jewelry, titles and deeds, real estate, you name it. The eldest daughter took absolutely everything. Problem was, everything was spoken for in a signed previous will to be divided equally among all the old lady's children. I think there were 2 others, upon the old lady's death. So the eldest daughter had essentially stolen everything from the sweet old lady and her siblings illegally. When the old woman had confronted her about it, the eldest daughter had lashed out and hit the old lady several times, and that was why she was bedridden. She wasn't expected to survive long, having been beaten, but she did not press charges on her own daughter. Instead, she had my mom's lawyer's boyfriend write the eldest daughter and all of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren from her out of the will entirely, that she had to return and surrender all stolen property to the other 2. She would get nothing. I've never been more happy to sign a legal document in my life. Hopefully she still had it. I spent 8 years as an EMT. 2 come immediately to mind, and though I think it was more fear than evil, evil still existed. The first was a guy and his wife drunk driving and running from the cops in their truck. They crashed into a tree, and the guy ran, leaving his wife trapped in a burning vehicle. When she was extracted, she wasn't burned, but her right foot was being held on by about 3 inches of skin and tendon. The second involved a special needs child who was left unsupervised in his living room and started having difficulty breathing. His parents, who had went to bed and left this 11-year-old kid by himself, waited a few hours to call 911. As we were working on him with CPR and IVs and such, his parents woke the rest of their kids up so they could watch us try to save his life. We weren't successful. After we got to the hospital, the parents showed up about an hour later, never looked at the body or said goodbye, and left. They apparently told the doctor to take care of the body, and never had a funeral or anything for him. Cats aren't highly regarded in my culture. One day, a pregnant mama cat got into my auntie's backyard and had her litter under their shed, which she then either abandoned or went out looking for food for. My young cousins, who were 6, 8, and 11, found the kittens and put them in a shoebox. Their grandpa, for whatever led-up reason in this own effed-up backwards way of thinking, got pissed off. He stomped on the shoebox in front of my young cousins and killed every last one of those kittens. My baby cousins came and told me the whole story, including what they saw and heard. I can only pray that incident doesn't cause them to be destructive and abusive towards animals in the future. In a similar situation, would you have done the same thing? I hope so. In 2013, I was riding the bus home from work. We picked up some passengers and a man got on with a high school-aged girl and a young boy. He looked like he was maybe in 5th grade. At the time, my bus route went past the methadone clinic, so I was used to witnessing craziness on the bus. I could occasionally comfortably whip out my phone and read the news, but generally speaking, I always had one eye on the other passengers. So I was just kind of sitting there pretending to look out the window, and these 3 passengers are maybe 5 rows in front of me. The man is speaking to the child, and he's pointing at the things outside the bus, telling stories to the young boy. The girl appears to be texting someone on her phone. At the time, I lived downtown, and that's where the bus was heading. The bus was passing through a section of the city that's the equivalent of our Chinatown when I thought I heard a girl ask the man, "Why are we going to a hotel?" At this point, there's a lot of ambient noise on the bus, and I'm not looking at her as she said it, so I'm not entirely certain if what I heard was correct or not. But thinking that this was what I'd heard certainly perked my ears up. I'm looking directly at her now. She appeared to be texting again. She looks up at the man and very clearly says to him, "My friend says I shouldn't go anywhere that I don't feel comfortable going." He replies to her that, "You just feel that way because women are prone to fear." At this point, it's clear as day what's going on, and it's written all over my face. But before I get a chance to do anything, the girl sees me and looks directly at me. The man turns around and sees that by this point, I'm halfway out of my chair. He dashed out of the stopped bus and took off down the street. I still regret not chasing after him, even if I have no idea what I would have done had I actually caught him. I spoke to the girl and the boy. He was taking them to a hotel. They didn't seem to know why. He was just some guy who always seemed to hang around near their school. I explained to the bus driver what had taken place. The bus didn't move after that. It just sat there parked while we waited for the police. I gave a brief statement, and that was the end of it. My closest exposure to genuine evil.